Hi, guys. I'm Courtney.
And I'm Lisa.
And welcome to the next chapter in the Book of the Dead, brought to you by Darkcast Network, indie podcasts with a twist. Hello. Welcome to the next chapter of the Book of the Dead. It is just me today. Lisa's not feeling well, so we're gonna take this ride together without Lisa, but that's okay. She'll be in the next one. Today I have for you a different kind of story. One, unlike others that I've covered before. The story that I have for you today is about an honor killing. And just to give you some general background information on honor killings, according to Britannica.com, they are most often the murder of a woman or girl by a male family member, and a lot of times their actions are justified in their own minds by claiming that the victim has brought dishonor upon the family or done something to affect the prestige of the family. And in societies where honor killings are more prevalent, women and girls are more closely monitored. Their virginity, their sexual purity are really monitored by male relatives, fathers, brothers, inevitably husbands, and victims are usually alleged to have engaged in sexually immoral acts, either talking to men who are not related to them in public or having sexual relationships with men outside of marriage, regardless of whether or not these sexual acts were consensual or not. However, a woman can be targeted for an honor killing for other reasons, including to not engage in an arranged marriage or wanting to get or getting a divorce from their husband, whether for a valid reason. Well, any reason is valid to want a divorce, but whether it be abuse related or any sort of reason, you want a divorce within this society, they justify that as a reason, or they use that as a justification for an honor killing. And it's really all about maintaining the family's reputation, maintaining their honor, their class, their level of distinction within the society that they are in. So there's a lot of justifications for honor killings. And it's not something that's talked about a lot because it's in the name, honor killing. They believe that this murder has happened for an honorable reason, to uphold the family honor. When that is really not the case. There's nothing honorable about murder. There's nothing justifiable about murder. And today's case is about just that. So everyone knows the story of Romeo and Juliet, the story of star-crossed lovers from rival families and how they died for their love. Now, this isn't quite that story in the sense that the Romeo and Juliet of this story did not take their own lives, but the case plays out in a very similar way. This is the murder of Jaswinder Sidhu. And as a little disclaimer, if I pronounce anything incorrectly, I apologize. I am trying very hard. Jaswinder Sidhu, otherwise known as Jassi, was born to Malkiat Kaur and Bakhtar Singh in a very prominent family in Maple Ridge, Canada on October 4th, 1975. Her family had immigrated from Punjab, India to Canada before she was born in around 1970. And she was born in a very traditional Sihk family where, quote, men are in charge of family honor and women are blamed for tarnishing it, according to an article written for the Vancouver Sun by Fabian Dawson. Now, before we really get into this story, I just want to kind of go over the caste system in India so you guys kind of understand where I'm coming from in terms of the familial dynamic. According to setfreealliance.org, the origin of the caste system in India dates back to more than 3,000 years, and it divides Hindus, and I say Hindus, but it's really been adopted all over India, this caste system. It did start originally in Hinduism. But it's divided into four main categories: the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras, based on who they were in their past life, their karma, what family line they come from. And it is believed that this system originated from Brahma, the Hindu god of creation. Now, the breakdown of the four main castes are: the Brahmins are the highest, the most esteemed caste. They often hold the job of priest or teacher. Then you have the Kshatriyas, which is the people often known traditionally as warriors, and they hold jobs like farmer, trader, or merchant. You have the Vaishyas, could also hold the job of farmer, trader, or merchant. And then the Shudras, which are often those that do manual labor. But then there's a fifth caste, which is separate from the others, who, quote, society believes to be so vile that they aren't considered part of the system at all, and they are the untouchables, or the Dalits. And they are shunned from society, forbidden to live amongst those of high caste, and they have jobs like latrine cleaners and street sweepers, and just like the jobs that no one who believes themselves to be a distinguished member of society would want to have, because they are above something so menial and dirty, quote unquote. So Jassi is born into a family of a higher caste, very, very wealthy family. The family lived in a massive compound on a blueberry field in Maple Ridge, which is an area rich in farm life and had a prominent Sikh population. In her family, Jassi was not encouraged to learn or further her education, and when I say massive, I mean this house was more of a castle that housed 3 generations of this family. The home had over 20 rooms in it with 6 kitchens and 19 bathrooms, and was valued at over $2 million with a view of mountains. And again, the reason I'm even mentioning the home is because it really drives home the power this family had and the esteem that they had. Like, they were mind-bogglingly wealthy. Now, when the family moved to Canada, they pooled their resources to buy 9 acres of blueberry fields that turned them into millionaires. Now, before we really get into Jassi's story, I wanted to give you a little information in Sikhism, because I don't want anyone to misunderstand the story as I'm telling it. Jassi's family could be considered very extreme in their beliefs, when Sikhism, at its core, from what I have read, is a very beautiful religion. And I don't want anyone to hear this story and take it as anyone who is a part of Sikhism or is a specific caste within this culture is bad. Like, that's not what this story is about. There are, as I've said, when we've covered other topics, when Satanism is involved, just because someone believes in a specific thing or follows a specific religion doesn't mean that they are inherently bad. There are exceptions to every rule, and this story is an exception, because according to Sikhnet.com, Sikh means disciple or learner, and was founded in northern India in the 15th century by Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Contrary to popular Western belief, it is nothing like Islam or Hinduism. It is monotheistic and has a main emphasis on equality between men and women. There are 3 basic principles of this faith: meditating on God's name, or praying, earning a living by honest means, and sharing the fruits of your labor. It rejects caste and class systems and believes in serving humanity. Turbans are worn to cover the hair in respect to God, much like many faiths cover the hair for the same reason. Sikhism views life not as a fall from grace, but a unique opportunity to discover and develop the divinity in each of us. Human rights and justice form a cornerstone of Sikh belief, and Sikh history features countless examples of Sikh gurus and their followers making tremendous sacrifices for the cause of religious freedom and justice. So again, seems like a very beautiful religion, a very beautiful faith to have. So just because this story is about a particular person or people doing something terrible does not mean that anyone or everyone that follows this belief system is the same way. And it's something that I really like to stress. When you talk about different religions and different beliefs and different faiths, you're always going to have bad apples regardless of the faith that you're in. I mean, I'm Catholic, and I could go down a rabbit hole on Catholicism and the bad things that happen in regards to Catholicism. So it really it depends on the person. It has nothing to do with the faith, and I just really want to stress that. Now, according to Medium.com, Jassi, being a young girl in this traditional family, was expected to become a wife and mother and uphold the family's values. She spent most of her free time in the house doing chores or saying her prayers, and her education was not a priority for her family, unlike her brother, who was encouraged to learn and succeed financially. She attended school at Pitt Meadows Secondary School, and her younger brother and cousins would, in essence, follow her around school to make sure she was behaving herself and acting appropriately. She, after school, was expected to come right home and do her chores, and she was rarely permitted to leave the home. So I'm sure she was very lonely. This little girl who couldn't go out and play with her friends, it's a very lonely existence to have, especially for a small child. Now, when Jassi is still very young, her father dies. According to Medium.com, he suffered from schizophrenia, but I couldn't corroborate that in other articles, so I'm not 100% sure. But either way, he does pass, and Jassi's uncle, Surjit Singh Badesha, takes over as the patriarch of the family. Her uncle was even more strict in his beliefs about women, and Jassi's life became even more controlled after her father's passing. As the years passed, Jassi grew up into a beautiful young woman, and after graduating high school, she enrolled in beauty school to become a beautician, which was a huge step for a very sheltered young woman. She was doing something on her own, and it was a taste of independence for her. She became very close with her instructor, Deb DeVos, while at the school and confided in her about her strict family life. According to the Vancouver Sun, after Jassi got a job following her graduation from beauty school, she was driven to and from work by her brother, and her paychecks were deposited into a common account, so she didn't have control over her money. And we'll see why that's an issue, or more of an issue, later on. In 1995, while on a family trip to Punjab, she meets Jaswinder Sidhu, who went by the nickname Mithu. Mithu was born in 1977 in Punjab, India, and he grew up lower class. In 1991, according to NRIinternet.com, the village he lived in, Kaunke, became a stronghold for the Sikh militancy, and he was one of 8 boys picked up on suspicion of being involved. He was brutally interrogated for a week before being released. According to the Department of Justice, this was a terrorism group in India, and the catalyst for the militancy was the attack on the Golden Temple in Amritsar in June of 1984. This was a small group of extremist Sikh separatists fighting for an independent Punjab named Khalistan. According to HinduAmerican.org, quote, started in the early 1980s, radical separatists spearheaded a bloody campaign to carve out an independent theocratic Sikh state known as Khalistan, which means land of the pure, in Punjab and other parts of northern India. So they suspected him of being part of this terrorist group, which he wasn't. And in fact, he was very, very young when this happened. So I don't know why they thought he was part of it. Maybe there were very young members of this extremist group. I don't know. But they thought he was part of it, but they ultimately released him a week later. Now, in 1992, Mithu starts playing kabaddi, which is basically a competitive form of team tag, from what I understand, and he does pretty well. He wins a few tournaments with his team and becomes sort of a local star, but he doesn't receive much money from these tournaments. Now, that same year, he's arrested again and severely beaten over his suspected involvement with this Sikh terrorist group, which, again, he was not. And it forces him to stop competing for a while, so he becomes a rickshaw driver in 1993, which is a very low-paying job. Then he meets Jassi. According to an article for the Washington Post, Mithu first saw Jassi in December of 1994, and it is love at first sight. He told the Post, "We passed each other and we looked at each other for a moment. She had her cousin with her. I was alone. It was love at first sight. Not a word was said. Then I mustered enough courage and went up to her cousin who I had seen in the village before. And this cousin told him that Jassi was staying at her maternal uncle's house. And he said, I didn't know she was from Canada then." Now, it turned out that the home of Jassi's uncle was right next door to Mithu's home. And that same night, completely besotted, he went outside and just looked up at the house. According to Mithu, that night, she came out onto the terrace of her uncle's home and looked back at him before leaving and getting on her cousin's scooter. She rode past his home and her scooter stalled, so she called for help, and Mithu's mother called him out to help Jassi. He said, "I went up to her and said hello. I asked what has happened. She said the scooter won't start. I took my time to figure it, although I knew there was nothing wrong with it. So she obviously thought he was like cute enough and interesting enough that she faked something being wrong with the scooter so he would come out and talk to her, which is just really, really cute. Mithu was 18 at the time and said he had never spoken to a girl before, so he was really nervous and tongue-tied, but Jassi didn't seem to mind. So for 3 days, they looked at each other from their homes until they were finally able to spend time together at a mutual friend's house. There was a tiny bit of a language barrier as Jassi's Punjabi was not very good, but they made it work and they were completely head over heels with each other. He said, quote, "We sat in the living room and talked. She said she didn't want to go back to Canada. She said she liked me, and now she had made up her mind that I would be everything for her. I also wanted to confess my feelings to her, but she beat me to it." So obviously this is very quick. You know, they don't know each other very long. It's been a few days, but it was one of those when you know kind of situations. And in that moment, Jassi knew that Mithu was the one for her and vice versa. But obviously they have plenty of obstacles. And we're going to talk about those obstacles in a moment. But he told her that he was poor. You know, obviously she comes from a wealthy family. But he said, quote, "Whatever I have, this is it. But I will love you a lot. I said this is no match. You are in Canada. I am in India. You are rich. I am poor. Our parents would also oppose." And Jassi knew her family wouldn't approve. Mithu was from a poor family and had a low-paying job, something that Jassi's family would not like, in addition to the fact that Mithu's last name was also Malkiat's maiden name. Now, according to that same Washington Post article, many families believe that marrying someone with the same family name was equivalent to marrying a family member, which I guess I kind of understand that mindset because of just the connotation it could hold. Like if someone from the outside looking in didn't know that they just happened to have the same name, it was like, what do you mean you married a relative? Like kind of thing. So I kind of understand that. But because of these reasons, Jassi decided to keep her relationship with Mithu a secret. So they write letters to each other for the next 2 years, mailed out by friends to cover their tracks, and had secret phone calls. Mithu said how they would cry on the phone about wanting to be together and how he wanted to sell his land and move to Canada to be with Jassi. Now, by the time Jassi had turned 24, her family had started planning to find a suitable husband for her. They threw huge parties and dressed her up in an effort to find a match, and her mother and aunts would appraise possible suitors to find the perfect match that would bring honor to the family and increase its influence in the community. The family was settling on an arranged marriage to a business partner of Surjit that would bring more financial power to the family. But Jassi came up with a plan to get out of this and begged her mother to take her to India to find a better match. In January of 1999, Jassi and her mother Malkiat, her aunt, and Surjit go to Punjab to find a potential husband for Jassi. Now, when Jassi arrives in Punjab with her mother and uncle, she again started meeting with Mithu in secret and begged him to take her away and marry her. Otherwise, her family was going to marry her off to a stranger. According to the Washington Post, an aunt of Jassi's felt badly for the young couple and decided to help them. Mithu would bring this aunt sleeping pills and she would mix it into the family's food and drink to make sure they were all sound asleep so that Mithu could sneak into the house late at night and visit Jassi. They eventually decided the only way to be together indefinitely was to marry in secret. Jassi snuck out of the house in March 1999 under the guise of staying at a relative's home, and with Mithu's friends as witnesses, they were married in a very small, quick ceremony on March 15th. Then they spend the night together in a hotel in a different city to cover their tracks. After their marriage for the next couple of weeks, Jassi would go out a lot to meet with her new husband, and her mother and uncle grew very suspicious. And their suspicion was placed on Mithu, who they saw a lot near their home. Now, Jassi would kind of try and hide what she was doing by saying she was going to go out with relatives, she was going to go see friends. But obviously her family, who's been keeping a close eye on her since she was an infant, knows that she's lying, or at least has a feeling or a sneaking suspicion that she's lying, besides the fact that they keep seeing this young man hanging out near their home all the time. So they threatened Mithu. Mithu said he was threatened to stay away from Jassi. told not to talk to her, not to go near her. And obviously, Jassi and Mithu are not having it. They're in love, they're married, and they want to find a way to be together forever. Now, when Jassi returned to Canada, it seemed like there was only one person she trusted enough to tell about her marriage to Mithu, and that was Jody Wright, who was Jassi's coworker. Now, according to NRI Internet, on April 19th, Jassi registered the marriage in India, prompting word to get to Jassi's family that she had married someone, quote-unquote, unfit, but she denied it. However, after returning to America, Jassi's family grows more and more suspicious because money starts coming out of Jassi's bank account and it's being sent to India. Again, she did not have her own bank account. She was sharing it with someone in the family. Maybe it was a family bank account. Maybe she had her mom or her uncle on the account with her, or names on the account with her so they could kind of see her transactions. Either way, they were seeing that a lot of money was leaving the account and being sent to India. And they know that she doesn't know a lot of people in India. She didn't grow up in India. She knows her relatives, and they've seen this strange boy hanging around. So they're starting to connect the dots. Now, Jody told CBC that Jassi's family eventually found out about the marriage because a former boss had called saying Jassi had left some personal belongings behind when she left. So a family member went to pick them up, and in those belongings were letters from Mithu as well as her marriage certificate, which she had hidden at this job. Jody said that Jassi had been threatened by her family as well as Mithu to end the marriage, saying, quote, she was fearful of her life. She told me she didn't know what they were capable of. They allegedly beat her and demanded that she have the marriage annulled, but Jassi refused. So her uncle coerced her into signing documents saying that she was forced into a marriage with Mithu. Now, I did see in one source that she was coerced by being given a document to sign saying that they were going to buy her a car and they needed her signature to buy her this car. I saw another source say that she was just given a blank piece of paper and told to sign it. So I'm not 100% sure which is which or which is true. But either way, Sergi does get the signature from Jassi. According to Jody, even before they had found out about the marriage, her family would sit outside the salon Jassi worked at to keep an eye on her. But when the news came out, they were there even more, and Jassi was being treated like a prisoner in her own home, to the point that Jody and Jassi had a code word. The code word was, I'm sick or I have the flu. That was my trigger to call the cops because she was locked in her bedroom. Jody said she had to call the police twice. On February of 2000, Jassi is trying to get Mithu to Canada, and she sends a letter to Ottawa to warn immigration officials that her uncle will try and give them false information about Mithu. And the following day, Sergi does just that. He files an affidavit that says Mithu and his friends forced Jassi to marry Mithu at gunpoint and uses the signature that he tricked Jassi into giving as validation that she was the one making the complaint. The affidavit is sent to India, and Mithu and his two friends, Bindri and Surinder Kumar, end up under police investigation. Now, Mithu goes into hiding after his two friends are arrested, and he calls Jassi begging for help. Now, allegedly, he speaks to Sergi, and Sergi tells him all of this can go away if you divorce Jassi, annul the marriage, and be done with it, and this will all go away. But Mithu refuses. So Mithu is ultimately found and arrested. Now, Jassi sends a letter to the police in India saying that the whole thing was a lie and she was not forced to marry Mithu, but the police tell her in order to withdraw the complaint, she has to do it in person. At this point, Jassi has been locked in the basement of her family's home, but she manages to make a call to the RCMP and they get her out of the home. She knows she has to get to India, so since her account is frozen, she borrows money in order to book a flight to India. Jody Wright told CBC she spoke to Jassi on her way to the airport and said, quote, she said she was going to go to India and bring her husband back and they were going to start their life together, to get an apartment. According to Medium.com, upon arriving in India, Jassi went to the police station and told the whole story to an Inspector Jaswinder Sidhu. He had her make a sworn testimony and Mithu was subsequently released and all charges dismissed. Mithu brought Jassi back to his home and properly introduced her to his mother, but fearing for their safety, they moved to a town nearby to stay with Mithu's relatives. In early June, according to the Hindustan Times, Jassi had filed an affidavit in the office of the Jagraon Senior Superintendent of Police that they faced threat to their life from her mother and uncle. She had also allegedly filed one in Ludhiana, the town they were living in. Now, on June 8th, 2000, Mithu and Jassi receive a call from Malkiad saying that they have her blessing and that they can put this whole ordeal behind them and how they should return to Canada to start their family and put everything in the past. Of course, Jassi is overjoyed and informs her mother about their plans for the next few days so that they can make arrangements to come home. And I don't blame her for being immediately overjoyed by her mom calling and giving her blessing. You know, I'm sure this is what Jassi has been praying for, that her mother would approve of Jassi marrying the person that she loves and doing something that she wants to do that in her heart she knows is the right thing for her. She knows that Mithu is the right man for her. She's so in love with him, and to have her mother's blessing, I'm sure, just took a huge weight off of her shoulder. But Jassi would never make it back to Canada. That evening, as they rode down the street in Punjab on a scooter, they were ambushed and attacked. Mithu was beaten and left for dead, and Jassi was kidnapped and taken to a farmhouse. One of the kidnappers calls Jassi's mother, and Jassi begs her to help her. The following day, Jassi's body was found in a canal near the farmhouse. She had been beaten, tortured, and her throat had been cut. Mithu was also found and taken to the hospital, suffering bruises, stab wounds, and his head had been split open. But he survived. He survived and was able to tell police what happened the night of June 8th, which was amazing that he survived, first of all, but he was able to tell police what happened and give them the number of Surjit, informing the police about the threats he and Jassi had received. So the police look at the call logs, and according to the investigating officer, Swaran Singh Khanna, they found over 200 calls made by Surjit over 4 days before Jassi's murder, including the day of to the same numbers. Over the course of the investigation, 11 people were arrested in connection with Jassi's murder, including, according to CBC, Jassi's uncle Darshan Singh. I will say, though, according to other sources, Darshan is named as being a close friend of Surjit's, so it kind of depends on the source. He may be an uncle, he may be just a friend of Surjit. Now, these men that were arrested confessed to being involved in Jassi's murder, but that they were paid $50,000 to do so. Now, paid by who? Malkiad and Surjit. In fact, these men said that after Jassi had been kidnapped and Malkiad had been called, when Jassi refused to leave Mithu even under threat of her life, Malkiad gave the final order for Jassi to be killed. According to CBC, 4 individuals were convicted in India of murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit murder in regards to the attack on Mithu and the murder of Jassi. According to NRI Internet, 7 men are convicted in plotting and killing Jassi, including Darshan Singh and former police officer Jaswinder Sidhu, who, according to the Washington Post, negotiated payments on behalf of Surjit for the killing of Jassi. Amardeep Singh Ray, Senior Superintendent of Police in Punjab's Sangor district, says the inspector, quote, was approached by the family. He put them in touch with the contract killers. He also provided them with a vehicle. And Ashwani Kumar, who was the one to kill Jassi, was given a life sentence for Jassi's murder and the attempted murder of Mithu. Although Darshan appealed his case and he was actually released. They also charged Malkiad and Surjit, who are in Canada at this point, with conspiracy to commit murder, demanding they be extradited to India to face these charges, but the RCMP initially refused to get involved on their end, basically saying that a murder that happened in India had nothing to do with Canada. It seems, based on my research, that the RCMP finally got involved in Jassi's murder in 2004 or 2005, and in 2007, according to the South Asian Post, they visit Mithu in Ludhiana to get a statement from him. Mithu is actually in jail at this point due to an allegation of rape from a girl in his village, which he, his family, and his lawyer vehemently deny. The girl, who was allegedly the daughter of Darshan, which led people to believe the fact that this allegation was false due to that coincidence, eventually recanted her statement, and it said that this allegation was a ploy to discredit what Mithu was saying in regards to Malkiad and Sergi being involved in Jassi's murder. But the RCMP go and speak to Mithu and get a statement from him about the events that transpired that night, and he tells them how he and Jassi were coming back from having dinner after a day of shopping for their wedding reception when they were attacked. Quote, they were riding along on the scooter when they saw a car parked ahead. It appeared at first to be broken down. Two men began to walk toward Jassi and Mithu, hiding swords and hockey sticks behind them. They swung at Mithu, who ducked. The blow struck Jassi's head. Mithu fell off the scooter. Then, he says, 4 or 5 men attacked him with swords and sticks. One man was holding her and she was screaming, help, help. Mithu said he couldn't see clearly. He tried to rise but couldn't. The men threw Jassi in a car and left him on the road. And then he told them about the threats that they had both received from Jassi's family, some of which were in writing in the forms of letters that had been sent. The RCMP also spoke to Deb DeVos, and she told them of how Jassi was afraid of her family. 12 years after Jassi was murdered, Malkiad and Sergi are arrested by the RCMP after the British Columbia Supreme Court issued warrants for their arrest under the Extradition Act. During the extradition hearing, Jodi testified about what Jassi had gone through after her family found out about the marriage, and how Mithu would call Jassi and tell her how he had been beaten, and he and his family had been threatened. Jodi said, quote, Jassi knew that the uncle had arranged people to go after Mithu and his family so that this marriage would break up. And in 2014, Malkiad and Sergi are ordered to be extradited to India to face the conspiracy charges as well as murder charges. However, in 2016, this decision was set aside over concerns for Malkiad and Sergi's safety in India and the concern that they would not have a fair trial. In 2016, the Attorney General of Canada appealed on behalf of the Indian courts the decision to not extradite the two, and in 2017, according to CBC, the Supreme Court ruled that the original extradition order was justified. The judgment said, quote, in this case, it was reasonable for the minister to conclude that, on the basis of the assurances he received from India, there was no substantial risk of torture or mistreatment of B and S that would offend the principles of fundamental justice protected by Section 7 of the Charter, and that their surrenders were not otherwise unjust or oppressive. But following that, there was a stay of extradition filed by Malkiad and Sergi because they were apparently not formally told of the decision to extradite them. That December, the appeal is rejected, and in January of 2019, Malkiad and Sergi are sent to India almost 20 years after Jassi was murdered. Due to their age, both are in their 70s. They were released on bail, and so far they are just living their lives in India, as they still have not gone to trial. Meanwhile, Mithu has been in and out of jail for various random charges that seem to have no weight to them, such as being involved in drug trafficking, and his brother Rana was arrested for an accusation of rape by the same woman that recanted the same accusation against Mithu. In a hearing in 2001, Mithu testified about the threats he and Jassi had received and how he believed that her mother and uncle were behind Jassi's murder. While they admitted on the stand that they disapproved of the marriage, Malkiad and Sergi denied any involvement in Jassi's murder. And that is, unfortunately, the last update in this case. As far as I know, Malkiad and Sergi are currently walking free, even though there is more than enough proof that they had Jassi murdered for who she decided to love, and believing she brought dishonor on the family. Like I said in the beginning, honor killings are almost like a silent crime because they are, in the regions where they happen, almost considered a consequence of primarily a woman's actions. According to an article written about honor killings by Sachi Cole for Hazlitt Times, quote, the class systems in South Asian culture are far more dominant and influential than they are in North America. But defining Jaswinder's death as an honor killing rather than a murder gives it a kind of exotic connotation, as if to say, this is something they do. It can never happen here. We don't do that. The honor killing classification makes it seem as if domestic violence, when committed in Judeo-Christian homes, is a frightening rarity. When done in South Asian homes, it's an intrinsic part of the culture. Jassi was murdered almost 24 years ago, and she still has not gotten justice. Nor has Mithu, because the people that orchestrated this attack have not been held accountable. Mithu's family are the ones fighting for justice for them. They are the ones that claimed Jassi's body after her murder, and they are the ones bearing the financial burden of 24 years worth of trials with no real results, especially considering that only 3 of the 11 people arrested that physically committed the attack and murder were incarcerated for it. It's disgusting to me that it's been so long. They know who was behind her murder. They know who was behind the attack on Me Too. And yet there is still no trial. Now, I read something saying that Surjit has a lot of power, that his and Malkiad's family are very powerful in India, and that could be the reason for all these delays. And it's very possible. It's a political game. It's a monetary game. I'm sure that there's bribery involved. I'm not saying there is, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was bribery and, that political power being held over someone's head in order to stall the trials, in order to have these countless charges be brought up against Me Too, even though, like I said, they have no weight to them. It's devastating that he has to go through this continuously. It's devastating that his family has to go through it continuously. And it's devastating that Jaswinder has never gotten justice. And there seems to be no remorse from Malkiad or Surjit for Jassi being murdered. The only people that seem to be heartbroken over it are Mithu's family and Jody and Deb. And I think it's evidence enough that they had a hand in this because they just don't seem to care. But that was the murder of Jaswinder Sidhu. And I apologize if this was a little weird for you. It was weird for me. I probably talked a little too fast because I had no one to bounce off of. But hopefully you guys liked this. If you do, maybe I'll sprinkle in some solo episodes here and there, see what happens. But that's about it. As always, we will see you in the next one. I hope you have a wonderful week. And make sure to join us next week for another chapter of the Book of the Dead. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this chapter of the Book of the Dead. And don't forget that you can always connect with us on Instagram. You can connect with us on Twitter, and you can absolutely connect with us on Patreon. We also have a merch store as well that we have frequent discount codes coming out for, so that you guys can get merch hand-drawn by myself at a better cost.
We hope you have a lovely rest of your week. And just remember, please be kind.
And don't forget to always stay safe, stay curious, and stay vigilant. Bye, guys.
Bye.